At a summer cookout in front of all our friends, my wife snapped her fingers at me and said, "I've got him wrapped around my finger like a dog." My wife's name is Brooke, and she has always needed an audience. The cookout was at our neighbor's place, 30 people in the backyard, and Brooke held court the way she always did, loud and confident, working the room while I stayed near the grill. When her cup ran dry, she looked across the table at me, snapped her fingers once, and pointed at the cooler. I got up and got her the drink because that was what I did, and she turned to the people around her and said it like it was the funniest thing in the world. "I've got him wrapped around my finger like a dog." People laughed. She loved that. After that night, the dog thing became a fixture. At restaurants, she snapped her fingers to get me to refill her glass. At parties, she told the story of how she trained me. She said she only had to give me one look and I would fix whatever I did wrong. Her friends called me the perfect husband. Brooke called me her dog to my face, in front of everyone. And the more people laughed, the more she leaned into it. She started correcting me publicly, cutting me off mid-sentence, waving her hand at me when she wanted to tell a story herself. She decided where we went and what I wore, and made sure the whole room knew she was the one in charge. I kept telling myself it was just her personality, and she did not really mean it. I was wrong on both counts. The one person whose opinion Brooke truly cared about was her father, Wayne. She had spent her whole life wanting him to believe her marriage was perfect. Whenever Wayne was around, she turned the performance up even higher. Her best friend Diane was the other one. Diane was who Brooke showed off for most, who she compared herself to, who she called every single day. So when Brooke decided to host a birthday dinner at our place for Wayne, with family and all her friends, she had the perfect audience assembled. She spent 2 weeks telling me what to cook and how to set the table and where to stand. She told me this was her night to show everyone how things ran, and I had better not embarrass her. The house was full the night of the dinner. Wayne was there, Diane was there, all of Brooke's friends were there. She ran me all evening the way she always did. Get this, bring that, take their coats, refill the glasses, all of it loud and in front of every single person in the room. When I set a plate down slightly wrong, she made me redo it while everyone watched. After dinner, when the whole group was still at the table, Brooke snapped her fingers at me, pointed toward the back of the house, and told me to go fetch the dessert like a good boy. She looked around the table first so everyone would be watching when I jumped. I did not jump. I stayed in my seat. I looked at her and said, "I'm not a dog, Brooke, and I'm not getting it." Then I went back to my food. She laughed and snapped again and said it louder. Sure, I had not heard her. I still did not move. The table went quiet, the bad kind of quiet for her, because everyone was now looking at her instead of me. Wayne was looking at her. Diane was looking at her. Brooke's face changed when the show stopped following its script. She told me to stop being childish. I told her again she could get the dessert herself if she wanted it. Nobody laughed. One of her friends said it was getting late, then another did. Then they were all finding their coats, and the party Brooke spent 2 weeks building ended an hour early with her standing alone at the back of the house. Before he left, Wayne found Brooke in the hallway and told her he had not raised her to speak to anyone the way she had been speaking to me all night. He said he was embarrassed for her. She had spent her whole life wanting him to think she had it figured out, and instead, he left his own birthday dinner ashamed of her. After that night, the house went quiet in a way it never had before. 3 days later, Brooke came into the living room with red eyes and a soft voice and sat down close to me on the couch. She took my hand and held it the way she used to when we were first together, and she told me she had been thinking about what her father said and that she thought maybe she had pushed things too far sometimes. She said she did not want to lose me. She said she was sorry. When she said it, something loosened in my chest, a knot I had been carrying for years coming a little bit undone, and I told her that was all I had ever wanted to hear. She leaned her head on my shoulder and we sat there together, and for the first time in a long time it felt like things might actually be okay. For 2 full days, Brooke was different. She asked me what I wanted for dinner instead of telling me what to make. She poured her own drinks. She did not snap her fingers or call me names or perform for anyone. She laughed at something I said, not at me but with me, and I had forgotten how different those two things felt. I called my oldest friend Abram that second night and told him I thought Wayne had really gotten through to her. Abram said to be careful. 2 days is not a pattern. I told him I knew, but I could hear in my own voice that I was already choosing to believe it. On the 3rd day, I came home early from work. The front door was unlocked and I let myself in and heard Brooke's voice from the cooking area. She was on the phone. I could tell by her tone it was Diane. I stopped in the hallway because something was wrong about how she sounded. It was not the soft voice from the couch. It was the old voice, the real one. And then I heard her say, "I just need to play nice for a while until he calms down. Once things settle, it will go back to normal. He always forgets." She laughed the same laugh she used at parties when she told the training story. Then she said, "He is easy like that." I stood there in the hallway with my hand still on my keys and listened to my wife describe the past 3 days like they were a chess move. The apology, the tears, the hand-holding, all of it a play. She was not sorry and not trying to be better. She was running out the clock until I forgot, because that was what I always did. I heard her hang up and then her footsteps crossing toward me. She walked into the hallway and saw me standing there. Her face changed for half a second, just a flash, and then she put a smile on and said she had just been telling Diane how good things had been this week. I did not smile back. I said, "I heard what you actually said, Brooke." Her smile dropped, not faded, dropped, like someone cut the strings holding it up. She tried to find the angle. She found one fast. She said, "You were eavesdropping on me?" Just like that, she flipped it, made me the one who had done something wrong. She stood there with her arms starting to cross and her chin lifting the way it always did when she was about to turn everything around. I was not taking the bait. I looked at her and said, "I am not doing this anymore. I am not your project. I am not your audience, and I am not going to forget." I said it calm, no raised voice, just a fact. Then I walked past her and out of the room. Behind me, I heard her say I was blowing it out of proportion, but her voice had a crack in it, small, one I had never heard before. It was the sound of someone who had tried their best move and watched it fail. I called Abram that night and told him everything. Then I thought about who else had been sitting at that birthday table when Brooke snapped her fingers and nobody laughed. I thought about Diane. She had not laughed either. She had just looked at Brooke with an expression I could not name at the time, but was starting to understand now. The look of someone tired of watching something ugly and pretending it was funny. She had left that dinner without saying much to Brooke at all. I sent Diane a short message saying I would like to talk if she was open to it. An hour later, she wrote back 3 words. "Yeah, we should." No explanation. Exclamation point. No explanation. Just that, and those 3 words told me everything. Because if Diane was fully on Brooke's side, she would not have responded at all. A few days later, Wayne called me. His voice was stiff. He said he thought we needed to talk about what was going on between me and Brooke. I thought he was going to back me up. Instead, he said Brooke had called him the day before, crying. She told him she had apologized and I had thrown it back in her face, that I had been cold and cruel to her all week. My stomach tightened. She had gone straight to the one person whose opinion mattered most and rewritten the story before I could tell him what actually happened. I tried to explain about the phone call. Wayne cut me off. He said she was his daughter and she had told him she tried, and it sounded like I was not willing to meet her halfway. He said marriage takes 2 people willing to bend, and the way he said it made clear I was the one not bending. I got off the phone feeling like the walls were closing in. The same Wayne who stood in the hallway at his own birthday dinner and told Brooke he was embarrassed by how she treated me had, a week later, been cried back to her side. I met Diane at a coffee shop the next afternoon. She arrived a few minutes after me and sat down across the table looking different from how I usually saw her. When she was with Brooke, Brooke's energy pulled everyone into the performance. Louder, more polished, always a little on. Sitting across from me, Diane just looked tired. She had her hands on the table and after a long silence, she said she had wanted to say something for over a year. She told me the finger snapping and the dog thing had been bothering her for a long time. She said she laughed the first time because she did not know what else to do, but it kept going and she started feeling sick watching it. She told me that the night of Wayne's birthday dinner, Brooke had called her right after everyone left. Brooke was angry, not embarrassed, just angry. She expected Diane to agree that I had humiliated her in front of everyone and ruined the party. Diane told her I had done the right thing. Brooke hung up on her without a word. 2 days later, Brooke called back acting like none of it had happened, chatting about a recipe, cheerful and normal, like the phone call between them had never occurred. Diane said, that is what she does. She pretends things did not happen until you start believing her version. When Diane said that, it hit me, because that was exactly what Brooke did to me. Every fight, every cruel thing she said, she would act normal the next day. And if I brought it up, she looked at me like I was unstable for still holding it. She did it so many times and so well that I started thinking maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I held grudges. Maybe normal people let things go the way she did. But hearing Diane describe the same pattern, I knew it had never been me. It was Brooke's whole system. Diane leaned forward and lowered her voice and told me that Brooke had said once, when she had been drinking, that she did the dog thing on purpose because it made her feel powerful. She told Diane that as long as I kept jumping when she snapped, she knew I would never leave. I sat with that for a moment. My wife told her best friend she humiliated me on purpose because it made her feel powerful. For years, she had been completely right. I asked Diane if she would be willing to tell Wayne what she had seen. She leaned back and said Wayne was Brooke's father, and if she went to him, she would lose Brooke forever. I understood that, but I said, you might lose her anyway. She hung up on you for telling the truth once. Diane looked at her hands for a long time. Then she said, let me think about it. That night I drove home, and Brooke was at the table with a printed list in front of her. Counselors she had already researched. She told me she had called Wayne to let him know we were going to counseling and that he was proud of her for taking the step. She slid the list toward me like a gift. I looked at those 5 names and understood what this was. Not about getting help, about getting a new stage, a therapist's room where she could cry at the right moments and play the wife who tried. I set the list back down and said, fine, but I am picking the counselor, not you. Her jaw tightened. She said, why does it matter who picks? I said, because you already picked the story. I am going to pick someone who listens to the real one. Her mouth opened, then closed. She could not find the angle. Not right then. I walked past her and went upstairs. That night, Diane called back and her voice was steadier. She said, if Wayne needs to hear it, I will tell him. I picked a counselor Brooke had never met, someone with no connection to our circle. When I pulled into the lot, her car was already there. She had arrived first. Inside, she was already seated across from the counselor, smiling, legs crossed, chatting like they were old friends. When the counselor asked what brought us in, Brooke went first. Her voice got that careful shake in it, the one that sounds like someone barely holding together, and she said she loved her husband and thought they had communication issues, that she had tried to apologize and he had shut her down. Her eyes got wet and she reached for the tissue box at exactly the right moment. The counselor nodded and asked follow-up questions, and Brooke answered everyone like she had rehearsed. By the time the counselor turned to me, I felt like I was already behind. I started talking. About 3 sentences in, Brooke said that was not what happened. I was joking. The counselor let it sit. I started again and got to the birthday dinner, and Brooke cut me off again. The counselor held up a hand and told her to let me finish. Brooke stopped, but her face tightened. When the session ended, the counselor said she wanted to see us the following week. In the parking lot, Brooke was glowing, saying she thought the counselor really got it. 2 days later, Wayne called again. He said he was glad we were in counseling, then told me Brooke had said I had been reaching out to her friends behind her back, trying to get people on my side, and that was not how you save a marriage. Brooke had found out about Diane. She had not confronted me. She went straight to Wayne and turned the one thing I had done to protect myself into proof that I was the one scheming. I called Diane immediately. I could hear the fear before she spoke a word. She said Brooke had called that morning screaming. Brooke told her if she ever spoke to me again, their friendship was finished, and she had already told Wayne I was the one trying to manipulate people. I sat in my car in the driveway that night and stared at the front of my house. I had Abram, who believed me but had not been in any of these rooms. I had Diane, who knew the truth but whose voice shook when she talked about it. I called Abram and said I did not know if I could do this. He said, you are not trying to win. You are trying to tell the truth. It just needs one moment where she cannot perform. I asked how. He said, stop playing on her stage. Make her come to yours. Every confrontation since the birthday dinner had been on ground Brooke chose. The couch, the phone calls with Wayne, the counselor's office, all her territory. I needed a moment she could not set up. The next morning at breakfast, I looked at her across the table and said, I want to have your father and Diane over for dinner. Just the 4 of us. A small thing. She looked up and I could see her working through it. Then she smiled and said that sounded nice. She said yes because she could not say no without looking like she had something to hide. She thought she would run the room the way she always did. The night of the dinner, I set the table. 4 plates, nothing elaborate. Brooke had changed her outfit twice and had the good candles out. Wayne arrived first and shook my hand and said he hoped tonight was a a step forward. Part of me still meant it when I said I hoped so too. Brooke came out of the cooking area smiling big and hugged Wayne and poured wine and asked about his drive. Already performing, already warming up the room, making everyone feel easy and comfortable before anything real could be said. When the doorbell rang, Diane stood on the porch looking like someone who had been in her car deciding whether to come in. She gave me a small nod, and when she walked into the dining room, she barely looked at Brooke. She said hi to Wayne and sat down and kept her eyes on the table. Brooke clocked it. I saw her eyes move to Diane and then away fast, filing it but not reacting. She kept smiling and poured Diane's wine and said something light about how nice it was to have everyone together. But I could see the small adjustments underneath, her eyes circling the table, reading Wayne's face, reading Diane's posture. For a few minutes it was just food and small talk, nothing Brooke could not steer. Then she set down her fork and looked at Wayne with a soft, proud expression and said their counselor thought they were making real progress. She said it like she had done the hard work and the room could relax. She looked right at Wayne when she said it. He nodded and said that was good to hear. I watched her check Wayne's face. I watched her glance at Diane to see if she would confirm it. I watched her settle back with the small, satisfied look she got when she thought the room was hers. Then I waited for a natural gap in the conversation, and I said it. I kept my voice even and said, Brooke, I want to ask you something in front of the two people whose opinions you care about most. Why did you call your apology to me a play? The room went silent, not loud, the opposite. Brooke's smile froze on her face, still there but stuck, like her expression had not caught up to her brain yet. She said, what are you talking about? With a small laugh at the end. I did not look away. I said, the phone call with Diane. 3 days after you sat on the couch and told me you wanted to be better, I heard you tell her it was just a strategy until I calmed down, that I was easy. Wayne turned and looked at Brooke. Diane looked down at the table. Nobody moved. Brooke recovered quickly. She shook her head and said that was not what she had said, that I had misheard her. Then she turned to Diane the way she always turned to Diane, expecting her to be right there, backing her up automatically. She said, Diane, tell him. Diane did not look up. The silence stretched. I could see Brooke's confidence starting to flicker. Her eyes locked on Diane. Each second Diane stayed silent, making Brooke's version weaker. Then Diane looked up. She looked at Brooke and said, in a voice that was quiet but steady, he did not mishear you. You said it. You told me he would forget because he always does. You said you just had to play nice for a while. Brooke's face went completely still. Not angry, not sad, just still, like every muscle shut down at once. Wayne set his fork down on his plate. The sound of it was the only thing in the room. Brooke turned on Diane and her voice went hard and sharp. She said, you are lying. You are taking his side because he got to you first. Diane shook her head. She did not raise her voice or get defensive. She said, nobody got to me. I have been watching you do this to him for years, and I never said anything, and I should have. The finger snapping, the dog thing, telling everyone you trained him. Then Diane said, you told me once that you did it because it made you feel powerful. Wayne looked at his daughter and said, Brooke, is that true? Brooke's voice cracked when she answered. She said, Dad, she is twisting everything. It was always a joke. She said it the way she had said it 100 times before, the line that turned everything she did into something I was too sensitive to handle. But Wayne looked at her and said, nobody at that birthday table was laughing. I was not laughing. And you just tried to get your best friend to lie for you in front of me. Brooke opened her mouth. I watched her jaw move. Nothing came out. For the first time in all the years I had known her, she had nothing. No angle, no version of the story that made her the hero. The four of us sat in silence that felt like the end of something. Then Brooke looked at me, and her eyes were different from anything I had ever seen in them. No plan, no move, just her, stripped down to something I had never seen before. She said quietly, so what do you want me to do? Not a challenge, not attitude. The voice of someone who had run out of moves and genuinely did not know what came next. I looked at her across the table and said, I want you to stop, not for a week, not as a strategy, for real. And if you cannot do that, then I am done. Wayne stood slowly. He looked at Brooke and his face carried something I had not seen on it before. Not anger, not disappointment, but grief. He said, I love you, but he is right, and I am not going to watch you lose the only man I have ever seen love you enough to still be sitting at this table. He walked toward the door, and as he passed, he rested his hand on my shoulder for a moment, said nothing, and kept walking. Diane looked at Brooke one more time. Then she followed Wayne out. The front door opened and closed, and it was just us. Brooke sat at the table with her hands in her lap and her head down. She was not performing. She was not checking who was watching or adjusting her face or preparing the next line, just sitting with what she had done. I stood in the doorway for a moment, then I reached over and switched off the light above the cooking area and walked upstairs. Behind me, somewhere below, I heard her crying. Not the kind with perfect timing and a tissue pulled at exactly the right moment, the other kind.